We are the Fox News specialists. Super busy news day. First, we want to report that the role of the White House press secretary, Sean Spicer, will be changing soon, according to Fox News Channel's John Roberts. Mr. Spicer would be getting a promotion overseeing all of the White House communications. Now, Eric, we had Governor Huckabee on our program just last week, and you asked, you must have a little foresight there about the likelihood of Sarah Huckabee.
Well, the reason why I asked is because she's been doing a great job. They've moved Sean a little bit away from the day-to-day press conferences, moved Sarah Huckabee Sanders Huckabee into that seat. But the question is, it's such a hot seat. Is this something you want,
right.
Not only as a career move, but for your own daughter?
Right. I was going to say, I would not want that job. That's a very, very hard job. And I'm not even just saying just because of President Trump, but the media. That's a very hostile relationship there. I'm not really jealous of whoever ends up with it.
Certainly, lots of changes there. But now on to global and very, very sad news. Fox News can report that Otto Warmbier, the United States student who was freed from North Korea, has died. The family issued a statement. Here's a portion. Quote, surrounded by his loving family, Otto died today at 2:20 p.m. It would be easy at a moment like this to focus on all that we lost. Future time that won't be spent with a warm, engaging, brilliant young man whose curiosity and enthusiasm for life knew no bounds. But we choose to focus on the time we were given to be with this remarkable person. That statement from his parents. You know, Eric,
I just left my son. I spent Father's Day with my son. Left him this morning. This ticks me off. This bothers me so much you don't even understand. I would love to be talking about this for a full hour. I think this is something that we really, really need to dissect as we know more. So I hope there's no autopsy. I'm not sure if the family will go ahead and do that. But don't forget, the North Koreans said he contracted a severe form of botulism while in custody. These doctors in Cincinnati are the best of the best. They said there is absolutely no evidence of any botulism in Otto Warmbier's body. Also, he was sent back in this what they call unresponsive wakefulness, basically a brain-dead vegetative state. This is terrible. China needs to get on board, and we really need to fix this, because I think North Korea is going to be the world's global, not just the United States, our biggest problem.
Yeah, Kat, I mean, we've been talking about North Korea almost daily on this program and throughout the network's coverage, but this hits home in a very personal way. This young man went to University of Virginia, so young, in the prime of his life, and his father, I think, puts it best, a pariah regime brutalizing his son. To Eric's point, when are we going to, as a world, as a global coalition, deal with North Korea?
Right. It's absolutely sickening. And Eric, I completely agree with you that there should absolutely be an autopsy. Clearly, their story is not the real story. Absolutely not. And when you see that trial where he was crying, you see what ended up happening, it's so, so sad. And it brings home what's been going on over there for a while.
We have to absolutely continue this discussion. But let's first meet today's specialist. He was once a disc jockey for bar mitzvahs and other special events, and he's even practiced a little bit of criminal law for the past 25 years, starting as a prosecutor in Miami and now as an adjunct law professor at the University of Miami School of Law. But he specializes, of course, in everything legal. Mark Eiglarsh is here. And she is the former dean at Iona College, a current professor in political science and international studies there. And she's also a pollster and specializes in everything politics. Dr. Jeannie Zaino is here. Thank you both for joining us. Obviously, a very heavy and very heartbreaking subject, to Eric's point, right after Father's Day. I can't imagine your father, your son coming home in basically a coma, a vegetative state, and then a week later.
I was hearing what Eric was saying, and I was thinking about my kids, and essentially this is how I look at it. A man was given a death sentence for stealing a poster. That's it. They can say, well, he got sick. It's under your watch, folks. He got a death sentence.
Yeah, and the thing is, they gave him 15 years of hard labor for stealing a poster out of a hotel lobby. This is insane. So we hear this. We hear these human rights violations against his own people, Kim Jong-un. But then we hear about other people that they're holding in captivity. Again, honestly, it's time now. It's time that the Chinese have said that they're going to go ahead and jump on board and help us out in this. They even said they may even institute some sanctions on North Korea, but we got to hold them accountable to this now. We need to say, if you're not going to do it, we're going to do it with you, China.
Yeah, they absolutely do. And we should give credit where credit is due, because the Trump administration worked doggedly to bring him home at least before he passed and his parents were able to see him. That did not happen under the Obama administration, and his father has raised that issue. So part of what we need to deal with is how we deal with these administrations and these corrupt governments who are holding our people, and how we get them home. And to your point, we absolutely do need to do something in terms of retaliation on this. And the question is what? And I think that's what we're going to wait and hear.
You know, I mean, if you, Kat, we don't want to start any, nuclear war. We know they have nuclear weapons, but we can certainly start with the leaning on China. In other words, making sure that China does, in fact, look, almost somewhere around 90% of the food that goes into North Korea comes from China.
Right.
Trade, some of the 85% of the oil or the energy that North Korea consumes comes from China.
Absolutely.
It's time to put a stop. And if they don't want to do it, put a stop to the banks that do business. The Chinese banks don't want a sanction from the U.S. They don't want that at any cost.
Right, absolutely. Our own sanctions really, honestly, won't do much. It has to come from China. Absolutely has to. Really, really does. And this is just something, it's so sickening. I'm just so sad thinking about this happening. They'll probably be excited for him to come home, and it's just sick. Sick.
Can I say one thing? I don't hold my breath that they're going to change. I don't.
No.
We should work to make that happen. But right away, there's some kids maybe thinking about going over there. I don't know his backstory. I don't know why he was there, and I'm certainly not going to blame the victim. But anyone thinking of going over there for any reason, should think twice.
I want to bring this point up. Eric, you have been a champion around China getting on board with this thing in a real way. And, I kind of can speculate, well, what's the incentive going to be for China? I think now, in the case of this young man losing his life for a poster, let us not forget what is happening here. We've got to, as a nation, make them get on board. This is not another one of these scenarios where their financial interests can outweigh anything here.
They have two.
This got to be so important.
China has two. We have two buttons we can push with China. Number one is the financial. Like I said before, there are ways to we can apply they're harsh sanctions. The Chinese banks need that income. They need to continue to turn over their yuan and others to do global business. Right now, they're growing at something like 4 or 5%. They need that in order to continue their growth, just to sustain themselves. That's a big thing. If they don't like that, there is the threat of, if there were any sort of military action on the Korean Peninsula, specifically in North Korea, do you know there would be literally 10 million refugees flooding directly into China? They would be devastated. It would be devastating for China. And guess what? No one else is going to help them out. We're not going to take millions of North Korean refugees. South Korea, what we should do is put up the freaking wall around the South Korea and say, oh, no, the refugees aren't coming to South Korea. This guy's been threatening South Korea for the better part of 40 or 50 years. You're going to go north to China. That may change their mind a little.
Yeah, I want to ask you, Dr. Jeannie, certainly if China wanted to, they could be incredibly helpful around this situation with North Korea. What is it going to take for them to want to, or at least be incentivized to?
It's going to take pressure on the part of the administration, and that's what I think we're really looking for. And the question here is the death of this young man going to be enough for the U.S. government to push China? Because they certainly aren't going to step up to it on their own, and it's going to have to we're going to have to use some financial pressure, some economic pressure. I don't think we should use military pressure, but we are going to have to work with them to say enough is enough. You cannot have young people going over and dying for these reasons. And one other thing, somebody needs to look at the tour group that let this young man and this group into North Korea. Because to your point, you really can't go where the State Department tells you not to go. And that's what happened in this case. There were warnings all over the place not to go.
Yeah, and we saw Dennis Rodman going to North Korea last week as well, and many of us scratching our heads, why in the world, are you going over here when we know what the situation is? This is a man who is starving his own people. He's absolutely deranged and crazed. In what circumstance does that even make sense?
Are we talking about Dennis Rodman? Or the leader?
Oh, well, right,
exactly.
Sorry.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. I agree. I don't get the concept. We go over there thinking that we have these cherished freedoms that we love here in the United States, but you're one step away from finding yourself stripped of your liberty and perhaps dead if you go over there. I'm just saying.
Think about this for 1 second. Right now, the North Koreans keep testing these intercontinental ballistic missiles. If they do go ahead and figure out a way to put a warhead on top of one of their longest range missile, 30 minutes is the lead time between firing that missile in North Korea and Los Angeles. Now, are you willing to risk Los Angeles? Or do you, I don't know, Kat, look, you and I are on the same page on a lot of these things when when the U.S. isn't directly affected, but now the U.S. is being directly affected by this North Korean crazy dictator. It may be time for a preemptive strike.
I don't think so. I think that military action should be avoided at all costs. I think we should at least, before we do that, try to put pressure on China, try to handle it absolutely every single other way, because then that's just a guaranteed disaster if we do that. I mean, we could do that, we could get them, but it's not like that they wouldn't come back.
The Israelis took out the Iranian nuclear setup in the 80s. They said, this is getting very dangerous for the Middle East, certainly the Iranians, and they preemptively went to a preemptive strike on the Iranians and wiped out their nuclear program, at least set them back 20 or 30 years. Why couldn't we do it? It's not a bad idea to start thinking about doing that with North Koreans.
I'm going to ask you this, Eric, and I'm not suggesting this good faith question here. There's such thing as pressure on China, and then there's an ultimatum with China. Is that on the table from your perspective? I know it sounds.
Again, it's not China. China can help, but it's not China who's our enemy.
No, it's not. But to Kat's point, maybe they're better positioned to be more effective, short of military action.
And as horrible as this is a child of a family. It's one incident. And so the White House's position may be, look, we've got, in terms of priority.
I know, I think that's dangerous, Mark.
Mark, they're testing an intercontinental ballistic missile that can reach Los Angeles technically in 30 minutes.
I understand.
It's just the grace of God that we've been able to successfully put something up that intercepts that.
But you just suggested you start going down a certain road.
Well, I asked the question, right?
Right. Well, you start going down a road, be prepared to keep going.
Well, what's the road? I mean, you can do what the Israelis did in the 80s and say, you know what, we're going to go ahead and just wipe you out and give you 20 more years or 30 more years before you're going to ever be able to deliver a nuclear warhead to the United States. What are they going to do? To fight back? I mean, you certainly would need China to get on board and say, we're not going to fight you either. This is your thing with the North Koreans. Japanese are on our side. South Koreans are on our side.
We have a lot of friends.
That would not be a bad idea if China says to North Korea, you want to play with the United States this way? You can. But we're not going to defend you anymore.
And I guess my question is, if not now, I hear what you're saying about the list of priorities, Mark, and I can appreciate where you're coming from.
That's not my position.
No.
That's the White House's position. We start here.
Sure.
We got one. That's how they think.
But sometimes I think one is enough. Honestly, frankly, and for me, if this kind of instance, under these circumstances, isn't enough to call to action a completely unanimous response on this, I don't know what it would take.
Well, the ballistic missile issue is a reason to consider it. I don't support it. I happen to agree with Kat on that one. I do not support that, and I can imagine the president would, given all that he said in terms of isolationism during the campaign. I do not think the loss, the unfortunate, really unfortunate loss of this child is enough to start that kind of military effort.
So what do you wait, Jeannie? What do you do? Do you wait till a missile's on its way to Los Angeles and hope, as Ebony points out, that missile interceptor works, and if it doesn't, you sacrifice Los Angeles to say, you know what, we waited, we shouldn't have waited? Or do you go ahead and say, there is going to be, and by the way, if you do this with what I just suggested, if you do a preemptive strike to wipe out their missile, or their nuclear program, or at least put it back several decades, you will have a lot of innocent people who will die. The casualties of war will be massive. Thousands, tens of thousands will die.
You're not talking
in
the abstract.
Problem.
Eric, are you advocating right now, if you were in charge, you'd say, let's go, let's wipe them out,
here's what I've said in the past. I said this Kim Jong-un continues to test these missiles that put more and more danger to our West Coast.
I'm with you.
I think
solution?
I think the next time you test another missile,
I'm always going to be
against.
I'm always going to be very wary of killing innocent civilians, large numbers of innocent civilians.
Los Angeles
I really certainly
are citizens. They will be victims as well.
100%, but there's nothing in the Constitution that allows for preemptive war.
And there are things between going to war and we could negotiate, we could pressure, we can try to defend ourselves.
We've had 5 presidents try and fix the North Koreans.
It's a huge problem, I grant you.
We do have to go, and certainly we could be here all day, but I want to say the question is, what are we waiting for, from my perspective? More on this when we get back. Mike Tobin will join us, and we'll talk about it. A dangerous turn over Syria. Russia warning it will treat U.S. fighter jets as, quote, military targets after the U.S. downs a Syrian government warplane over the weekend. Please stay with us.
Who was freed from North Korea last week has died. Let's bring in Mike Tobin of Fox News with the very latest. Mike, can you tell us, by the way, is there any White House response by chance?
We don't have any White House response yet, but what we had is a situation that was never very hopeful, certainly not since June 13th, when Otto Warmbier returned to the United States and returned to his hometown of Cincinnati, or returned to his home state of Ohio, I should say. But all hope is lost now. The family says at 2:20 p.m. he passed away. The result of, I guess, for lack of a better term, injuries he received. What the doctors determined is that he had significant loss of brain tissue, and that was a result somehow of oxygen deprivation. They're not exactly certain what happened, but whatever happened was not consistent with the story that came out of North Korea, that it was somehow following a case of botulism. They said there wasn't. The doctors at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center said the injuries were not consistent, or they didn't see evidence that was consistent with a case of botulism. What they saw was a significant loss of brain tissue that was more consistent with oxygen deprivation. And this heartbreaking statement that came out of the family reads, "Unfortunately, the awful, torturous mistreatment our son received at the hands of the North Koreans ensured that no other outcome was possible beyond the sad one we experienced today." When he returned to the United States, his eyes would open, but he wouldn't respond to people. The family said in this statement that they just released that initially he did not appear to be aware of his surroundings at all, but they said his appearance changed. In fact, reading from it, within a day, the countenance of his face changed. He was at peace. He was home, and we believe he could sense that. So there was never really much hope that Otto Warmbier would recover. He had been sentenced to 15 years hard labor, essentially for subversion, and the crime that he confessed to was that he had taken a propaganda poster. So it was something that minor that caused him to be sentenced to 15 years hard labor in the North Korean prison. And whatever happened, he sustained these injuries, or he was subject to a prolonged period of oxygen deprivation, and since returning home, we're not entirely certain what happened in the hospital and how his condition changed. The family says he sensed he was at home. They believed that he looked like he was at peace, but sadly, his condition was never in a situation where it was going to improve. It didn't. He passed away at 2:20 p.m. this afternoon.
All right, thank you, Mike Tobin. Back to the specialist. Tensions escalating in the Middle East today. Yesterday afternoon, the U.S. military shot down a Syrian Air Force bomber on its way towards some U.S.-backed rebel strongholds. With that, the Russians delivered a terse statement saying it will target any, important, underline, any aircraft it sees west of the Euphrates River. Now, why would Russia care? Aren't we all fighting ISIS anyway? Well, the answer is yes, but Russia is a major ally to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Ebony, so tensions escalating. What a mess it's getting in the Syrian Middle East.
This is where it gets very, very complicated, Eric. We know, who's, kind of on the team against ISIS, but this relationship between Russia and Assad becomes very problematic in this area. And I got to tell you, I'm very concerned about this suspension of this hotline. This was done back in April when President Trump put the 59 missiles in the air to basically punish them for the chemical warfare there. It's a very concerning thing when there's this conflict around our coalition around fighting ISIS.
Yeah, so one of the issues about this, about fighting ISIS, even if you push ISIS back, yes, there's a global coalition against ISIS. Well, what happens to all these territories that they used to have? And that becomes a little bit of tension. Does Syria get it? Do the Russians get it? The Iranians get it? Do we get it? How do we handle that?
Well, Syria is a mess, and candidate Trump understood that and wanted to avoid getting involved. And now it seems he's quietly getting more and more involved with just these little things like a airstrike here and then now this. But there is no little thing when it comes to. But seriously, little isolated incidents. But there have been more and more. And it's just so much more than just Syria. Then you have Russia involved, and this whole cluster of issues all brought together, which is why if he wants to have a war in that area, then you're supposed to be having Congress debate and vote on it.
I'm very concerned. I don't know if anyone read this story the way I did, but at the risk of appearing like Chicken Little, I'm like using the F word, fear. Okay? You've got Russia calling this an act of aggression. You've got Syria saying it was a flagrant attack and where there will be dangerous repercussions. Should we ignore that?
Yeah.
I'm concerned. Yeah. Help me, Eric.
Yeah, here's how I'll help you. The 59 missiles that these two very, very brilliant young ladies just pointed out, they landed in a Syrian air base that was populated by who? Syrians and Russians. Yeah. Nothing happened. I think Russia, Jeannie, Russia has to say something like that. I don't think they're going to shoot down an American fighter jet.
No, and let's not forget what this is all about. This is all about what happens after we get rid of ISIS, which we will, because to your point, everybody is attacking ISIS, and ISIS is being pushed out. This is a question of territory and power and strength in that area, and all of these competing agendas. We haven't even mentioned Iran yet, but you have Russia, you have the United States, you have Iran, you have Saudi Arabia, and they are all competing. And these series of incidents that we've heard from Iran, the United States, Russia's response, are all about that. What is going to happen once we push ISIS out? And I'm afraid as well because, you know, this can be a collision course for all of these powers and these superpowers trying to get that territory and get power in that area.
But Eric's not worried. I was feeling good for a moment. Apparently it's just tough talk from a bunch of guys with egos.
I'm not worried about the Russians. I could care less what Bashar al-Assad thinks about us. That's the thing. And Kat and I have been on the same page as far as what we should, what our Syrian policy should be. I don't think we should be there. It's not our fight until. The more I thought of it, in fact, what really jogged my memory is Axios today, if you don't read that, you should, has a map showing the shrinking of ISIS territory. As ISIS territory shrinks, and it was massive, there's going to be a power vacuum in those areas, and you certainly don't want radical Islamists, Iranians, for example, picking up that vacuum, filling that void.
Of course not, but as we get more involved, I'm just saying that you should supposed to go through the proper constitutional channels if you do want to declare war.
I will say a lot of people take that position of not having too much involvement in Syria until they see those photos. And it happens cyclically. Every time you see those children and babies washed up, people take that position.
All right, we'll leave it right there. President Trump's legal team now fighting back at rumors and reports. Should be reports, not rumors. He's under investigation for possible obstruction of justice. Our specialists are going to help us make sense of all that right after this.
Trump's legal team, Jay Sekulow, making the TV rounds over the last 2 days, denying that special counsel Robert Mueller has opened an investigation into possible obstruction of justice by President Trump. The denial comes despite President Trump's tweet last week that appeared to confirm an investigation and a Washington Post report that said one was underway. Sekulow elaborated on Fox and Friends earlier today.
ABC News reported yesterday that, in fact, their source, everybody's got these sources, not supposed to be talking about anything, but everybody's, sourcing and leaking. Their source said that, in fact, a determination had not been made to investigate the president. So, again, you've got Washington Post as their source, ABC News is having their source. Meanwhile, none of us have been notified of an investigation.
Thankfully, we have two attorneys on set with us to help make sense of all of this. Although I don't even know if this is a legal issue so much as a what's happening issue.
Well, listen, I don't know whether he's under investigation or not, but I've been defending folks for 25 years. They don't send us a notice when they're under investigation. So the fact that he wasn't noticed, imagine they're in the back room thinking, this thing about Trump, could be criminal. Hold on, let's stop talking. We've got to go give a notice to his lawyer.
But James Comey said, in fact, no, he was not under investigation. So that's different than not saying anything, correct?
I would agree. When you're hearing it from the government, the investigators, that has a little bit more truth than his lawyer.
Notice, by the way, Eric, he said a little bit more truth. Because I will tell you, I have called the federal government. Now, granted, my client wasn't Donald Trump, but I called, hey, you looking at my guy? Oh, no, Ms. Williams. And then 5 months later, indictment comes down.
It happened last week to me. Yeah. No, he's not a target. But are you going to arrest him? Well, we are eventually. That's like calling him, we don't want to call him a beggar. We'll call him a roadside entrepreneur.
Okay, but then if there isn't one of these, does the Washington Post have the right to go ahead and say Donald Trump's under investigation?
Look, you can't completely blame the media here because Trump also said, I'm under investigation. So he's a little bit to do with it, kind of a little.
And he is always under investigation.
Sure.
Everyone's always investigating him.
Well, I will say here, and I don't mean this flippant, punctuation would have saved the president here. No, seriously, if you want to put it in quotes, then
there you go.
We wouldn't even be talking about it. Wiretaps,
But
just a couple quotes.
The bigger point here is that most people in the United States and across the world don't care that much about whether he's under investigation. We have had now 72 hours of people saying, is he or isn't he? When there are so many other things going on, and to your point, if he's under investigation, we'll hear about it eventually. And this kind of is he not? Yes, he did say that in his tweet, so he brought this on himself.
By the way, if Mueller's hired 13 new lawyers on on Thursday or Friday of last week.
Yeah.
They better be investigating him, otherwise they're going to be wasting a whole heck of a lot of money.
Absolutely. I mean, we suspect that they're going to look at everything, right? I mean, that's not a big issue. And so to have this guy go out there and say, you know, he's not. And by the way, Donald Trump says there's a witch hunt. Well, if there's no investigation, there can't be a witch hunt. I mean, so you have to have both of those things go together.
All right, well, some of the investigators hired by Special Counsel Mueller are coming under scrutiny for potential political conflicts of interest. Kellyanne Conway highlighted the issue earlier today.
I think it's relevant that people know that Mr. Mueller's team includes folks who gave significant amounts of money. One person I read gave more money than a single mom makes in over a year just to Hillary Clinton. Speaker Gingrich says that one of them was actually opposing the FOIA request for the Clinton Foundation. So that's relevant information for people to have.
I wouldn't deny that a lot of this is political. I think it's pretty clear that a lot of people have political reasons for wanting him out.
So a lot of the lawyers, we talked about this on Friday, a lot of the lawyers that Mueller hired, Mark, are big donors, Clinton donors. Some of them maxed out to Hillary Clinton time and time again. Not only that, they're going to spend hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars on these investigations.
Right. And I actually find myself agreeing with Kellyanne Conway for the first time. I don't mind people knowing. But what they must have is a fair investigation, okay? I mean, everybody who investigates someone has some political...
Well, let me ask you this, Mark, because, again, 25 years in the game as an attorney. Do you do the political contributions? I'm just curious.
Do I have to answer?
You're not, I mean, you're not on the stand. I'm just, you know, because we were talking about it.
Have I made contributions? Yes, I have.
Yeah, to candidates and to candidates of a particular party.
Yes.
And do you feel it undermines your ability to be fair and impartial?
No.
Okay. I'm asking because I'm
because of who I am, but I don't trust other people.
Well, maybe I'm just a cheapskate, but I don't make too many contributions. So that's something that I feel like lawyers are going to be scrutinized under moving forward, for sure.
But so they've given money? How is it any different than someone else saying, you know, I supported them somehow? It's, again, everybody's got political leanings. We just want people to be fair.
What do you think?
There should be transparency in terms of what they gave and who gave. And you know what? These lawyers have to be very careful because even the appearance of impropriety makes people think that this is a political witch hunt to the president's point. I am not a fan of government attorneys doing that. They're supposed to be fair and impartial. They should be that way.
Clearly, when you max out a donation to a candidate, Hillary Clinton, you favor what she's all about and you dislike what the other candidate, Donald Trump, is all about.
And that's the problem, though, Mark.
Those are the people I would like eliminated from the council.
The presumption becomes that you can't be fair and impartial. And I think that's where, as attorneys, we kind of have to step up.
Where does it end? All right, so if it's not a donation, do we check somebody's tweets out? If they ever made a pro-Hillary tweet, that means something? If they ever went to a rally in college?
I think donation is a pretty good line.
That's the line.
There's no such thing as an objective human. That's what makes us humans.
Yes.
All right. Coming up, the latest on the death of Otto Warmbier, the United States student who was freed from North Korea. And next, prosecutors set to retry Bill Cosby after a mistrial is declared in his sexual assault case. But will a second attempt result in a different outcome? Back in a moment.
They are Mark Eiglosh and Jeannie Zaino. Let's continue the conversation. The legal drama around Bill Cosby has no end in sight. His sexual assault case declared a mistrial after jurors remained, quote, hopelessly deadlocked. Prosecutors are now vowing for a retrial for Cosby, but Cosby's legal team sounding unfazed.
What I would say to all of Mr. Cosby's fans and some of the folks on the other side of this, we have a wonderful criminal justice system in this country. Trust it, believe in it, and I'm confident that if this case is retried, he'll be acquitted.
All right, Counselor, so there we have a pretty standard statement from defense team after a mistrial, you know, not the worst case scenario, but it's not like he was acquitted. So as the prosecutors move forward, because they obviously have to retry this case because of, you know, the heightened scrutiny around it, what do you expect them to do differently from a prosecution standpoint?
Unfortunately, they have what they have. We're in a CSI society. We don't have any DNA in this case. We have no video. We have no audio. It's testimonial evidence. And the defense has done what I do when I try cases, embrace as much as you can, and to just part company on a couple of details. And that's what they've done. Trials are not about the truth. Trials are about what could be proven. That's very
Can I ask both of you guys something? But the judge only allowed the testimony from 3 of the accusers. There were some 60 accusers.
Really, only one in Constance herself.
Right, in Constance. So why wouldn't will there be another judge? Will a different judge see the next trial?
That's my question, Eric. I think that possibly there will be another judge, and if that new judge allows more of that testimony around acts, prior bad acts and proving pattern, maybe that will be the only hope I think the prosecutors have of a different outcome.
Maybe, but what you've got 12 different jurors coming in, and every juror decides a case based upon their life experience and the lens through which they look at a case. We don't know if it was one lone holdout. Was it half?
We don't know. Dr. Jeannie, let me ask you this. If you're on this, this jury, this new jury, how in the world are you able to be, we're speaking hypothetically, of course, objective and fair when the entire world now is being subject to what this looks like?
I think it's very difficult for these jurors, and I give them a lot of credit. They went, I mean, they were, what, 5 days out, 6 days out, and they were hopelessly deadlocked. Very tough, because we've all heard the reports. We've all heard what he's accused of having done, and yet you have to judge it on the evidence that's presented, and unfortunately, there's not a lot of evidence to put down there, right? I mean, this thing happened a long, long time ago. You have the testimony of Bill Cosby himself, you have the testimony of the victim, or the supposed victim, and this other one woman. The 59 other women didn't take the stand, and you have the mother. And so, you know, it's a lot of he said, she said.
Right, and the reason I want people to look at this and think about why people don't report sexual assault. This is exactly why they don't report it. When you say, oh, if you were raped, if you were assaulted, why don't you tell somebody? This is exactly why. Because it is he said, she said, and when you are a young person starting out and the other person is Bill Cosby, you're going to worry that they're going to believe Bill Cosby. And how would you know that that might be the case? Maybe because almost 60 women have still come out, and there are people out there who still don't think he did anything. It's disgusting. It's sad. It makes me sick. And I'm not even talking from a legal perspective. I'm talking about culturally. I know I'm going to say on Twitter, yeah, well, people false accuse. You know what? There's a lot of women out there who are struggling silently with abuse from powerful men, and they don't want to say anything because people refuse to think about how difficult it is for anyone to believe them.
I think that's very true. I think that we have to give a lot of credence to that, because Mark's right. There's not about what happened or what didn't happen. It's about what you can prove, which is a different standard legally.
Yes.
But certainly, you're right, Kat. There are women that know that the facts are kind of stacked against them in terms of the believability component.
Because jurors can say, we are 100% sure that he probably did it. That's not enough. In the Casey Anthony case, jurors were literally crying when they left that jury room. They were physically nauseous, holding back tears, some of them, because they knew that she was guilty, but the proof wasn't there. That's the best system we've got.
So they should keep. Then they should keep trying. They should keep bring them to trial. If it's a hung jury again, do it again, do it again, do it again.
And I expect, Eric, they will have to do that, because the prosecution here, first of all, politically ran on this in his campaign. And I said that on the docket last week. There will be no closure if we walk away with a mistrial here. And that's very important for the alleged victim in this case, and even for the Cosby family. And really, I think at this point, this has become such a polarizing case, Kat, for America on this issue. So straight ahead, protesters storming the stage twice of the Julius Caesar production depicting the assassination of a Trump lookalike do not go away.